Hello, everyone, and welcome to Trek Prime Episode 37. We're a week delayed on doing this show because, Jeff had a little bit of an ear infection last week, but it's given us some time to prepare some things. And tonight, we're going to talk about the last Star Trek: The Next Generation movie thus far, Star Trek-Nemesis, and interestingly enough, the last canon Star Trek movie we've had so far. And speaking of canon, Jeff and I had an experience the other day that actually motivated a different way in which we're going to do this podcast in the future. And it all started with a video from a YouTuber called Midnight Edge about something called the Prime Deception. And I showed it to Jeff, and basically it discussed how CBS and their use of the word prime in terms of discovery being prime, did not actually mean it was canon at all. But when I listened to the video, it upset me at first, of course, because our show is called Trek Prime. And if the Prime universe does not represent Star Trek canon, and is actually a legally motivated term for something else they're doing, I didn't want us to be associated with that at all. And Jeff and I kind of agreed. But I talked to Stuart over on Trek Yards. He has a big hi to you. And even though he hadn't seen it, everybody was asking him about that video and what he thought. And, Jeff and I talked about it, and we made a decision based on what we, actually we had two ideas, and I'll let Jeff discuss what Jeff's original idea was before we get into it a little more.
Well, after I saw the video, I thought perhaps it would be good to change the name to Trek Canon. That way it was more specific as to what we're actually here for, because like you said, Andre, the word prime kind of associates now with that false,
right? And
what it is prime, but it's not.
As you said in the comment thread, there were people already starting to make that association.
Yeah.
Even though it was in the context of rumor.
Yeah.
And I told Jeff, actually, I said, well, if we have to, we'll do it. But I really don't like the sound of the name Trek Canon, just as an aesthetic thing. I want to build an audience. But so we pondered, and I talked to Stuart, and we both decided on something that Jeff and I are going to do for the foreseeable future. I mean, there's no official news that the word prime does not refer to canon. There's no official news on that yet. It was mentioned as rumor in the video. What we're going to do, and I started this tonight, by the way, is one of us, or both of us, are going to mention at some point in our podcast in the future that this is about canonized Star Trek, which means Star Trek that goes from the cage in 1964, 65, up through what we're talking about tonight, Star Trek-Nemesis.
Yeah.
And we're going to be covering things that happened during that time frame in that spectrum, and including things you might not expect, but it's going to be in that vein.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to let you know we'll be emphasizing that, because the term prime has been put into something of a suspicion by this thing. And I don't know if the Midnight Edge meant to do this, but, as Jeff pointed out, people in comments, they sometimes, they blow things up and a lie becomes the truth, as they say.
Yeah, and more importantly, I mean, and you mentioned it to me yesterday, is that when they were talking about that part, it was under the guise of a rumor.
Right. It was they covered themselves by saying that, but people don't necessarily listen to that part of it.
Yeah.
It's like getting a self-help book, and and instead of reading the whole book that says, well, you should do this and that, they read the part that say, consider yourself a fairy, or consider yourself a goblin or something.
Yeah.
People go around wearing wings and free associating or something.
It's just a disclaimer like this, so that way they're not liable for anything they say that isn't true. They can it's a rumor. So
it's like they could have just said what Kirk said to those androids in Harry Mudd. Now listen to me carefully. I am lying.
Yeah.
But hey, it's a speculation, it's an idea, but we just want to cover ourselves to those people who consider Prime to not be canon now because they watch that video and they're going by a rumor that we don't know for sure about.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure that, maybe later on down the road we might have to hear about this again sometime, when...
Right. I mean, that's a possibility, but again, this is about the last canon. That's my second time for the night. Canon Star Trek film, Star Trek-Nemesis. So you want to get into the show?
Yeah.
Now that we've covered ourselves here.
Yep.
I could do it more. There. I'm all covered.
Yeah, so the beginning of our videos, we're just going to remind people that we're talking about canonized.
We can do it somewhere in it, but we're going to make sure, it's canon, I mean, yes, and I can actually insert another trope in here. As much as I hate to admit it, Detector Circuit is canon.
Yep.
Screwed up as that is, it's canon.
Yep, it is.
So, yeah, not all canon is perfect, but it is what it is, and we're talking about that.
That's right.
So, I mean, and like I said, Star Trek is littered with imperfections.
Oh, yeah.
So, like I said, Enterprise has tons of them, but it's canon. We saw a TOS Connie in it, and it's canon. Yep. So, that's it.
Yep.
Now, we're going to be talking tonight, has a lot of problems, but it's canon. Have I said canon enough yet?
Yeah, I think
All right, I think we out canon the canon here, so, okay.
Yeah.
Back to canon. I mean Nemesis.
Yeah.
Star Trek, we'll call this Star Trek canon, whatever. Star Trek canon, the movie. Anyway, So Star Trek-Nemesis. Okay, this came out, I want to get my date straight here, too.
I think it's 2002, I think.
Came out in 2002, December 13th. And, Star Trek movies were either, at that point, summer movies or Christmas movies.
Yeah.
Generations was certainly a Christmas, Thanksgiving-ish movie. Star Trek 6 was, and this was. But, Jeff and I talked about, I just want to discuss our experiences with the movie first. Jeff and I both had a similar experience. We both went into an almost empty theater to see this thing.
Yeah, I was the only one in the theater that watched it. I went, it was just dark in there, and I sat in there. I was there early, and I just sat there and everything. I was waiting, and nobody else came in. And they started the thing, and I was thinking, you mean the projectionist still has to run this damn movie? Well, just one person in theater? Well, I didn't know.
I never heard anything like that before.
I didn't know at the time that those things are run by computer now. They don't need anybody in the projection.
Right, we're thinking in 80s and 90s terms, they have to have a person up there. They don't realize it's a little switch that just goes on when...
It's all programmed to start when it starts. So here I was watching this movie, and of course it's nice. I mean, it's quiet. You get the whole thing to yourself, so you can laugh and burp and everything if you want, and not have to worry about people throwing popcorn and soda at you. So, so yeah, I mean, it was the first Star Trek movie where I actually watched it by myself, and that was really weird, Well,
I was with my parents at the time, but there was only one person other than us down in front, and it was a man who was about 80. And I could see him near the screen. You could see the white hair on top of his head, and I thought, this is really odd. There's only one man in here who looks like he more or less came to the movie theater. This is really odd. And so this is the whole experience in this empty theater. And the time period too. This was just after 9/11. We were about to go into what turned out to be an absolutely hideous war, and it was just the timing of it was. And Enterprise had just been on about a year at that point. Was it in its first year?
Yep. And,
so Star Trek was sort of, I don't know, in terms of what it had been in terms of canon, it all seemed to be winding down somehow. But when I saw Nemesis, there's a reality to it. If you're familiar with the Nemesis poster, oftentimes, I noticed that with the Next Generation movies, they often tended to put Picard and Data on them.
Yeah.
I don't know why they always did that. Except
I think they felt that Data and Picard were the more popular characters in the Next
Well,
Generation.
they did with First Contact. Except with Generations, they had that Kirk Picard thing, and then with Insurrection, they had that bizarre red space devil thing that I don't know why they. I think it was supposed to be F. Murray Abraham's character there, but
Space devil.
yeah, there's this big space demon that was coming after the ship. I think it was that guy who went. That, but it was like this demon.
Actually looked more hideous in the poster than he actually did on the
Yeah, in the movie he was just a guy with his skin stretched, and the thing was like this big demon that was just coming off the planet. So with Insurrection, I'm back on the last movie. With Nemesis, you basically have the shadow of a character that looks almost like Blade.
Yeah, you're right, it does.
I mean, the bald head, the kind of the black suit they have, it looks like Blade.
Yeah.
It doesn't really look much like, but actually it's a character in the film which this film. The reason I mentioned this film is because, Star Trek's always been a cerebral thing. That's one of the part of its appeal to me is its cerebral nature. But cerebral and overly complex are not mutually exclusive. This movie is overly complex. Yeah. All right. What is this movie? What elements are in this movie? Because can you think of one thing that ties everything in this movie completely together?
Well, usually it comes at the end of the film, but all we see at the end of the film is the destruction of everything. You know,
It's like an orgy of destruction and death.
So it's like nothing mattered that you watched in the whole film because it was all going to boil down to just a big space battle.
Right. And that's another thing. This real thing in Star Trek is usually about conflict resolution. Maybe somebody dies, maybe something bad happens. There's usually a conflict that gets resolved in some way.
Yeah.
In this movie, it was just like boom, 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 and shake the room. It's all destroyed, and restore the Enterprise. And there's been a lot of problems. So anyway, let's get on with the beginning of the movie, which freaked me out, honestly, a little bit. But this is just me personally. We see this very nice view of Romulus, which, you know, Romulans, as we've talked about, were just underused in a lot of ways. Yeah. We could see they could be a good character to use, and they didn't have to be just a stock adversary.
Yeah.
And this movie, you know, a movie of the Romulans, why not? You know, why not utilize them in a theatrical way?
I mean, I was glad to see the Romulans used for once in the film.
But what's the first thing we see? The Romulans in a council chamber playing a chess game like they always do. Move, counter move, just these stereotype Romulans. So it's like, okay, are they going to get to something here? Well, somebody brings in a piece of jewelry, this big green thing appears, and the Romulans basically slowly disintegrate right in front of us.
Yeah.
I'm saying, whoa, this is like Romulan horror now?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not knowing what I'm going to see here. So then we just shift forward, I think, is it to the Enterprise or Beta Z, where Riker and Troy are getting married?
Well, I always thought they were on the Enterprise in the holodeck. That's what I
Right, that's what I thought when I first saw the movie, the way they were setting this whole thing up.
They didn't really say specifically where they were at. They just give you this idea that they're on a planet, but they could have been on the ship. They could have been on a planet. They could have been anywhere, you know.
They could have been in whatever equivalent the Enterprise E had at 10 forward. I don't...
Yeah, I mean, who knows?
I don't know. Maybe they had a place called 12 Starboard on that ship. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the deck... If we discussed the decks of the Enterprise E as being a little bit dicey, yeah. Even in this first movie, there's 24 here, there's 27 in one part of it. It's...
Well, I really, just to point out, they did change the design a little bit of the Enterprise E in this
Yes,
film.
they did. They added some new stuff near the shuttle bay on top.
Yeah, that's right.
They elevated the lower hull, and they did something different to it.
Yeah. They changed the shape of, like, the neck. They actually kind of put, like, a neck there a little bit. To give
if I understand it, there was some time between
Insurrection
and Nemesis. I'd say about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, it felt like it was quite a while after the last episode of Deep Space Nine, you know, and Voyager, because a lot happened. I mean, Worf obviously is back on the ship, so whatever happened to him at the end of Deep Space Nine didn't work out, so he ended up back on the Enterprise crew. So.
Yes, I want to mention that Worf at the end of Deep Space Nine. Now, this is the first Star Trek movie where there's no accompanying TV show in that time. We have Enterprise, which is a prequel, and you know, Deep Space Nine has been over for a few years. Voyager had just ended the year before.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, I'm sure much to the chagrin of a lot of people, because I know about this, a lot of people do not like the idea that this happened. We have Admiral Janeway. Some people out there, and I'm going to say this right now, this is not about her, feel that Janeway absolutely butchered the Prime Directive out there in the Delta Quadrant, and that she had no business getting that rank. I'm not going to get into that argument because... Well,
originally they wanted to have a little more Voyager characters in this movie. They wanted
which would have been nice. I would have loved to have seen maybe a character...
actually, we're going to bring Jerry Ryan.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Can you imagine Picard as a clone in this movie? 7 of 9 is going to sing again.
I don't understand why they would need her. I mean, after seeing this movie, what role does she need to be in the film?
I don't know, just because she was a character that really kind of made Voyager interesting, because she started out to be kind of just a figure, a body, and then she developed into a character that was very interesting. So I think people just wanted to see what happened to her. But it made a little more sense to have Janeway just be an admiral, I guess, in that case.
Yeah, it was just a small scene. I don't know why everybody got mad about that. It doesn't really make sense.
Well, I mean, there are some people who think Janeway was the worst captain in all of Star Trek. I don't know if you've heard that trope, but...
Yeah, I remember you told me that once.
Yeah, and it's not just one person. It's a lot of people. And they think, how did she ever get to be the Admiralty? How did they didn't haul her to the Starfleet brig? You know, but... Hey, I mean, Janeway is something I want to discuss at another time, because there's a lot to discuss with her, but she's appears in this movie. Finally, she's got one of those gray uniforms. I don't know why she just didn't have it after the 4th season.
Yeah, because
the doctor went back, and he knew they had those uniforms, and he came back and was still wearing those old red ones. And I
exactly.
mean, after all, they had the new tricorders after the third season anyway. They just magically had those.
Yeah.
So, and they had all these new shuttlecrafts. So I don't know why they just didn't magically get new uniforms. Made more sense. But
Yeah.
anyway, she's got the gray uniform. Doesn't look great in it, but then again, they're not my favorite uniforms either. So nobody did.
Yeah.
But the point is that she's telling him that the Romulans have a new praetor, and he's Reman. Now we know about Remus existing because they've mentioned it on and off throughout. I think wasn't that more like Fanon or more like kind of the.
We first heard of it. They called it Romai or something.
Yes, Romai, or some say it was Rom 2, but we'll go with Romai.
So they kind of changed it a little bit.
That was Romai in the beginning, and that's canon too. I just consider it canon. Even though it's weird canon, it's still involved in all that TOS-y stuff. But anyway, so yeah, but it eventually settled on Remus. And in this movie, Remus became official. Maybe Romai was another plan. I don't know. We can discuss the Romulan Empire setup another time. But anyway, so it was Reman. And apparently the Reman are aliens that sort of resemble kind of bony creatures.
Yeah, I thought they looked like bats because of their head.
Yeah, they have these bony bat. They almost look like Gray Kazon in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Or like maybe Jem'Hadar that were flattened. You know, like they took a Jem'Hadar and they just flattened the face out and made everything go.
Yeah.
You know, it's just they look flat, like somebody just squished their faces in. They just have these flat looks, and they're smaller. If I remember, they're smaller aliens.
Yeah.
And anyway,
you had a theory that perhaps they were actually populated Romulus, and when Romulans showed up there, they probably.
That's not canon, though. That's just.
No, but it was a good theory, though, that maybe that's where they came.
Well, you know, because I mean, and here's my thing: if I'd written Nemesis, I would have talked about that subjugation. That maybe the Romulan planet was once Reman. That the Romulans, when they left Vulcan, conquered that planet and subjugated that species.
Yeah. And
the movie could have been about racial supremacy and colonization.
Yeah.
And how Star Trek is that?
Yeah, really.
We do a social story there. I mean, and come on, you got 9/11, the War on Terror. That would have been great.
I mean, I think they could have started the film off like that, and then that happened in the past.
And then concentrated on the story from that point.
Yeah, and then.
But had that be a strong base.
Yeah, the story would have something to do with what happened in the past.
No, I don't believe we're doing this. We're only 10 minutes into talking about this movie. We're already rewriting it. I mean,
well, I know. I just, you know.
I mean, you're right. That's kind of how messed up this thing actually got. You know.
Well, yeah, I know. But the thing of it is you know, between shows, you and I talk, and we come up with all these great theories about how things
exactly. And we talked about the Nemesis theory of having the Remans be a subjugated species by the Romulans, and having that be a motivation for this Reman leader to come in. So anyway, we're down the Romulans again, but that's what they were talking about in the Romulan Senate when they got disintegrated. They were talking about the new praetor, and that's when they get disintegrated. But anyway, so Troy and Riker are getting married. Even Picard is like, well, how come you made me wait so long?
Yeah.
And you know,
I think it's like Riker's ready to retire. Now let's get married.
Yeah, like we're ready to retire. We're ready to go into the Starfleet old folks home here, basically. And you know, you're
really, geez, almost everybody is at this point, you know.
Yeah, even the youngest of them, Troy, is starting to get middle age. So
yeah,
you know, they really procrastinated and didn't always choose the best quality of rebound. I'm sorry, I mean other partners. I just say that because it was obvious in Farpoint that there was a thing, and they just didn't go with it. So.
Rebounds.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm talking about that woman on Angel One that Riker got involved with, who made a win with that lace thing.
Yeah.
And that guy Devanani Raw.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they didn't exactly make the best choices of people. Let's put it that way.
They tried everything, I guess. You know.
And then Riker ended up with a character who was genderless and couldn't get with him, so it was a mess. Picard is sitting there like, why do you make me wait? It's so obvious you two were into each other all these years.
Yeah, I
so,
know.
Of course, we have that obligatory Data's gonna sing scene, which is Gershwin. No, I'm Irving Berlin. That's right, Irving Berlin, because Worf does not like Irving Berlin, and he makes it clear he doesn't like Irving Berlin.
Yeah, and it's funny that Worf would get drunk over human alcohol and not something like fire.
Well, that's weird. Klingons drink wine, has smoke coming out of it, and blood, gutty wine, or whatever it is. And he drinks human alcohol, and he's...
Yeah, he's sitting at the table, looks like he's about ready to vomit. And I'm looking, when was the last time we ever see Worf this drunk? I mean, it's like, come on.
I mean, is Klingon water fine like a wine cooler or something? I mean, is it really weak? I mean, so what do they just like give him a Long Island iced space tea, and he's like, ugh.
Yeah, really.
You know, either that or he just really didn't like Irving Berlin.
Yeah.
He seemed like, oh, Irving Berlin.
We get to see Guinan for like Guinan. We see Guinan in this scene.
Guinan and Wesley. I guess we got to have that conversation.
Wesley.
Where did he come from?
Yeah, and he's wearing.
Wesley was supposed to be stopping time and going off with the Traveler into other planes of existence with warm clothing, as his mother advised. Here he is in a dress uniform, disappeared at their wedding.
He's wearing a uniform. So is he back in Starfleet?
Right. So, like I said, there's a bonus feature, I believe, that explained that there was not a bonus feature, but a deleted scene where it explained how he re-enlisted. I think there was a bonus scene or something.
Was seen it on the DVD release? Or?
I believe there was. I have to look back at it, but I believe he talked to his mother and how he'd come back into Starfleet or something.
Huh.
But I don't know. Guinan was there.
Yep, Guinan, yep. Guinan.
Where she had disappeared from the last couple of movies.
Yeah.
Just hadn't been present. So I don't know if she was on the Enterprise or she just came back from whatever place she was in those movies. We didn't see him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, been running the bar on that ship. We didn't
really, the whole beginning was really kind of a puzzle, wasn't it, in a way?
And guess who wasn't there, who absolutely should have been there if it was on Beta Z? No Luxana Troy.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Was Majel alive then? I think she was alive still.
I think she was then. But I think there was the impression, remember in Deep Space Nine, they said that Beta Z had been invaded by the Jem'Hadar, and...
You think she might have gotten killed in that invasion?
Either that or she couldn't make it to the ship because maybe she was involved with something to rebuild, what was damaged on Beta Z or something like, I don't know. I mean, it could have been that.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying maybe this was all in a holodeck, because when they cut away from this marriage or this thing scene, they're in there, the ship is out and everything, so we don't actually see where they were prior to that. If they were on a planet or they were doing something.
Wesley and Guinan were holographic characters, or do you think they were real? Or
they probably were there. I don't know why Guinan would have gone there and then disappeared for the rest of the movie.
I mean, I know Whoopi Goldberg was busy during those years with a lot of films, and I know that that was pre-Big Bang Theory, so I don't know what Will Wheaton was doing, but I mean, I don't know. Wasn't that around the time that Majel was kind of involved in that Earth Final conflict still a little bit?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Oh, that show gone off the air by then. I don't remember, but maybe she was involved in other things or not well at that point. So, So anyway, we go from the wedding into this Riemann thing, and Picard is going to Romulus or Remus, I guess, to meet this new Praetor, and
they pick up that positronic signal on a planet with all those data points.
And that's the Thalaron radiation, which we saw in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. And
basically it can affect human flesh. So then they arrive and they find the ship in orbit, and it's called the Scimitar. Now the Scimitar isn't a D'Deridex class ship. It's this big Michael Bay looking ship with all these little things on it.
You're not going to skip over the Doom buggies, are you? The mad.
No. That's next.
Okay.
No, we haven't gotten to that part yet. Was that after the Scimitar or before?
No, it was before.
Oh, I'm sorry. Scimitar. We saw that ship. So they're going onto that planet. Right. There's another. This movie is so complicated. I forget which place is which here. they go down to this planet because they detect the radiation, the Thalaron radiation down there. Is that what it was? Oh no! Wait a minute. It was a signal from another android.
It was a positronic signal that.
Right. And they went down there with a ship called the Argo, which looks like a cool new shuttle. I'm like, okay, insurrection again. Let's just slap as much shuttles as we can into this thing. But okay, new shuttle. So the shuttle has kind of wings on. It looks kind of cool. I don't know. Maybe Tom Paris was like, maybe it was going to be. Maybe he was going to land on the planet and be like some sort of Star Wars pod racer kind of thing. So no, the shuttle kind of lands, back pops out, opens up, and this Jeep pops out of it. This little freaking Jeep. I'm like, really?
Yeah, we go all Mad Max here at this point.
Right, talk about a trash can presentation. You have this relatively cool new shuttle, and this little Jeep pops out of it. Yeah. And it's not even that impressive looking a Jeep. It's just like a generic Power Wheels thing.
It looks like, something a kid could build.
Right, like Power Wheels, kind of thing. I mean, you could interchange that and put the audio with that old commercial. Pow, pow, Power Wheels, power, 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 makes it go. You could put a little theme with that little Jeep. And I mean, I was actually laughing a little bit because I'm thinking of Picard driving around a little Jeep on the dunes.
Yeah.
And wasn't Worf and Data with him in that?
Well, Data was sitting next to him, and Worf was in the back with the gun, the big gun there at the back of the
Yeah.
Jeep.
So okay, instead of having guns on this Jeep, he's got his own gun. So it's a weird thing.
I know, it's just bizarre.
The whole thing is it's like Mad Max. So then the Remans show up in totally.
I don't think they were Remans. They were, I don't know, they were probably native to that planet, whatever alien race they were, and they all had.
I was thought they were Reman, but there was some alien.
This was that they weren't even in the neutral zone yet. They these other aliens, they also had Jeeps. So it's like, oh, now they have.
Right, so now everybody's got. This is a Mad Max planet. Everybody's got these Jeeps.
Yeah, and so here we're finding these parts everywhere, and everyone's trying to figure out why we're finding all these parts, and then they show up and they start shooting at them.
You know, I was gonna ask you, do you think that the reason why that whole scene was in there was because this was during the whole Operation Iraqi Freedom thing, and everybody was kind of glamorizing militarism at that point, so they were gonna kind of put everybody in these like desert Jeeps?
No, because you know, if anyone that's ever been in the service, they could not.
No, they didn't look like ones in the actual military. I know.
It doesn't look anything like that.
I mean, you know, there's just the Hollywoodization and glamorization of that. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
But they made it look toy-like. I mean, everything looked like it was out of a Mad Max reboot or something. Yeah. And that scene really did not per se. They could have beamed down there and just walked around, and there could have been this nice view, like what they had in Star Trek 6. Remember, they took them to Alaska and they had these big views of like glaciers. They could have had them walking up the dunes and have that little soundtrack, but no, we have to have this Jeep.
Yeah.
So then they finally find a bunch of Data parts. Yeah. And or these Sung type, and you have to wonder, why does Sung just casually discard or bury his androids all the time? He buried more and.
Sung that put him there. It was Sinjon. Later we find out.
Well, yeah, Shinzon, a character we have not yet talked about, but yeah, it was him. But Shinzon being the new Romulan Praetor, for those who haven't seen.
Because what happened was he had programmed that B4 droid to be a spy, and he knew they were going to go and get him when they heard those positronic signals.
Right.
It was all a setup.
And when I saw it before, I kind of knew who that was because his mother, Data's mother, Juliana, had said that they had lost several prototypes before Data.
That's right.
But where did Shinzon find him? Was he in Dr. Sung's?
Yeah, you got two questions here. How did he get a DNA sample from Picard to make a clone, and how did he know where this other B4 android was?
Okay, so they found this android, and Data made a very critical mistake. He actually transferred all of his knowledge over to B4. Yeah. Which I totally would not have done, by the way.
Well, he did because he figured that would would boot him up or something to make him.
I mean, if being a spy for Shinzon, which he does not yet know, he's basically giving him all their tactical information, which he had. Yeah.
So now this B4 knows where all the starships are.
Exactly. So if B4 really wanted to do damage, he could totally do damage.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, the point of that's not even the point of the matter. You're absolutely right. Shinzon, he meets up with Picard, and it's revealed that he is a clone of Picard. And later on, he's looking at a picture of himself played by, who's the guy who played Shinzon in that movie?
It was actually in a Mad Max film, the guy that played...
Tom Hardy.
Yeah, Tom Hardy. He played...
Yeah, he didn't think much of Nemesis as his career anyway. I know that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and that's funny that they picked him because then he turns, and later in years, he does the last Mad Max film.
Right. So we can call this Star Trek Mad Max if we want. They have Jeeps.
And he was in the third Batman film too. He was the villain.
Okay, well, like you say, he's a villain in this one, but I see his point about being typecast at this point as villainous characters. It's easy to take the guy with a shaven head and make him Lex Luthor. You know? So anyway, the thing is, and basically, he comes off as kind of a Lex Luthor type in this movie, to be honest. But anyway, wearing a Blade costume. But anyway, the thing is that so Picard's looking at a picture of him his young self in the academy. And he's bald. The Tom Hardy Picard. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, wait a minute. We established Picard, even during the Stargazer, had some hair.
Yeah.
So why is Picard suddenly shaven head or bald in the Academy?
Somebody wasn't paying attention.
Picard wasn't always shaven head or bald. He had hair at one point. I mean, wasn't he supposed to have hair in TNG, actually?
Well, they tried wigs, little toupees or something, and they said it just looked funny on him, so they just left him bald.
So, but yeah, the character was never intended to be bald, but that was just because Patrick Stewart was. They figured it's easier.
He didn't have hair when he was younger, and they screwed that up by showing him bald in that picture.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into the direction and the writing on this movie a little later because there were some issues that actually happened with that too, with this, which I didn't know until later, but it's interesting. So yeah, they meet up with Shinzon, and basically, the situation is that the planet with the Jeep was the Coloran system.
Yeah.
So there's been a military coup by Shinzon, and he's become leader of the Remans, and he's constructed this flagship, the Scimitar, which again is like basically a Michael Bay type transformer ship.
Like, how did he actually have time to build this thing without nobody knowing about it? They don't even explain, because the Romulans certainly wouldn't have allowed that to happen. Let the Remans build a ship of their own.
Right.
But,
so they build this ship, and it's emitting all the Sauron radiation they've been detecting, and then Crusher, in taking readings of this Shinzon, have realized that he's aging very rapidly, and through that discovered that he's actually been cloned.
Yeah.
But like I said, where did he find the time, number one, like you said, to get Picard's DNA in the first place to do this?
Yeah.
Where did the Remans get the time to do this with the clone Romulans, or Remans actually, whatever they did to clone Picard?
Yeah.
And not only that, where on earth did they get the resources to build this thing?
They're supposed to be a race of slaves to the Romulans, so how could they have snuck off and build this massive pile of junk? That's supposed to work.
Unless they just took every ship they had and just bolted
it like a transformer.
Yeah, I guess it's a Michael Bay transformer ship. You'd better be Optimus Prime or something. It's just things made up. It's crazy screwed up. I mean, if you built a model of it, you'd probably have to have like 1 million shingles.
Yeah, it's got so many wingtips on it. I mean, it'd be crazy.
Yeah, it's like a birdie. It flaps in space or something. It's just it's a crazy, wild design, and it's just, my goodness. It's just, so the Remans just have these just overly sized ships. But anyway, so this one is so I guess what ends up happening is that they discover that B4 has actually betrayed them in the end.
Yeah, he's infiltrated the computers, and he got all the information that he needed. And
right, and where he's been kind of playing the inadequate android the whole time.
I mean, and all this other stuff beforehand of Picard having this conversation with Shinzon while they were eating and stuff. This was all supposed to be a delay tactic to give B4 the time to get all this information. So he was basically stalling for time. So all that stuff was for nothing. What we saw between Picard and Shinzon, all this.
So like we said, they set up this thing between Picard and Shinzon where they're trying to understand who each other are, and they're having this dialogue where B4 has basically betrayed the crew already. So basically, you had a whole scene that, like you said, means nothing. Yeah,
because there was no chance of Picard trying to convince this guy that he was doing the wrong thing. He was just buying time.
So basically, it's like, okay, there's a coup. Romulans have been killed. The Remans are trying. Shinzon is going into this sad sub story about how the Remans have subjugated him and kept him as slave labor. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Or the Romulans had, I believe.
Yeah.
And he found friends in the Remans.
Yeah.
So and then in the end, he's already done that thing with B4. He's already betrayed the crew. So I think maybe they should have had the conversation with Shinzon after the whole betrayal.
I don't know.
Rather than just set that up earlier, it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it was just weird. I mean, it gave you some of a backstory to Shinzon as to what happened to him when he was a kid growing up as a prisoner and how he met the Remans. But it didn't go any further to say where the Romulans actually got the DNA that ended up in the Reman hands, where they used it to create a clone of Picard. So that was always a question that never got answered in that film, And even Picard, the character, had to ask, how, where the hell did he come from? Basically, he wanted to know where they got this DNA from him. So, I mean, was there like a conspiracy, or was it Section 31? Was that the answer to this question? Dude, it was like,
too, but anyway. So the point is that so here I am. I'm somewhere between, I think, Shinzon's conversation with Picard and B4's betrayal. I think I fell asleep a little bit. So because I'm trying to follow all this stuff, and I'm only 22.
Then we have this bizarre sex scene with.
That
actually
would be internet fodder if that was done today in a movie. What that was, I mean, now in the age of Me Too, that would have exploded this.
Yeah.
Shinzon apparently, and we established early on, as we've seen many times, is infatuated with Troy. Now, I've heard about Troy being written in as a form of rape fodder throughout most of Star Trek, because that happened to her in The Next Generation too, if you remember.
Yeah.
Telepathic rapist, who she defended herself against, I will say that. But, you know, so here, she and Riker, who are newly married, are in bed, making love, and then all of a sudden, Shinzon comes in and just out of the blue, mind rapes her, which has been done before.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, this is not a particularly pleasant thing to have to deal with again. So,
apparently the Viceroy had telepathic abilities, and he was going through Shinzon's mind basically to project himself and Riker's spot. Basically,
we find out that this villain is not only trying to manipulate events with the Romulans and trying to use Thalaron radiation to destroy humanity, if I understand it.
Yeah.
He basically wants to rape Troy. So, what happens is that Troy goes to Picard and Crusher, and she says there was a mental violation or whatever. So what does Picard tell her? If you can stand a few more of these violations, we can find out. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, Picard, you're an enabler. What's the matter with you? Oh my God. You got to say that. No. You're, not you.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad enough in First Gun, he's knocking over little ships and shooting up the board. Now he's advocating for rape.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, geez, where's Picard who should go down to Shinzon and lecture about the morality?
Luckily, he didn't get to finish the rest of his sentence because he was beamed off the ship onto the scimitar when he was mid-sentence telling Troy to take more of these rapes. And all of a sudden, so it's like, well, fine, thank God he didn't finish that order.
Like I said, I'm trying to think, maybe Shinzon was somehow manipulating his mind in a way. That line was so un-Picard.
Mm.
That was very un-Picard. If you can stand a few more of these rapes, like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
You know, go down and give Shinzon one of your classic lectures. You're good at that.
Yeah.
Give him one of your Picard speeches. I'd love to hear another one, but no, you can take a few more of those rapes. Ugh.
And it was only then, when Picard was taken, where they finally raised their shields.
Right. So, like I said, already we're in a tactical mess. Nobody knows what they're doing. And then there's an attack by, I think, the Remans at some point in this, if I remember.
Well, yeah. I mean, once they get, once Data goes over there and rescues Picard back from the, and they take one of their ships, their Scorpion shuttles, and they.
Right, and that was one of the few things marketed for this movie. The AMT made a model of that little Scorpion shuttle.
Yeah, it's like, oh, whoopee, you know, just.
And I never got it. It was a little pod. I mean,
yeah,
it was not a big deal, but they took it. Oh, do we get to the flying Data yet?
Well, Data, he was infiltrating the ship.
Right, he kind of flew into space out of the ship, if you remember.
Well, that was at the end of the film.
Oh, okay. I think of that flying Data when I think of.
Yeah, but what happened was they figured out what B4 was doing, and they captured him on the Enterprise, and then they were trying to ask him what he stole and what he gave to Shinzon, and B4 didn't know because apparently his memory doesn't contain the information. It just automatically wiped it. So Data shuts him down, and Data decides, well, I'm going to pretend I'm B4, and I'm going to get onto the Shinzon and rescue the captain. You know, so he gets, he wears the same thing. He starts to act like B4, like, you know, he just kind of acting mindless and all that.
Right.
And he finally rescues the captain, and they steal a shuttle in this big, giant Star Wars kind of gunfight in every corridor of the.
Right. That's when they had all the battle scenes. Well, you remember a lot more of this movie than I do. I mean, by this point, I'm totally confused what's going on because there's all these plots I'm trying to follow. You know, they're throwing everything
they're sitting there shooting and everything, and at the same time, Data's trying to figure out the combination on the wall of how to open this friggin' shuttle door so they can get in there. And the door comes down, and they find a shuttle.
We're on subplot number 6 now, are we? At this
What's
point?
that?
We're on subplot number 6 or 7 at this point, just to remind myself where we are.
I know. I mean, there was so many.
There's like 6 or 7, and this is the point where I'm like in the theater because I'm trying to follow all this stuff, and it's just like knocking me out, you know?
Yeah. So anyway, he gets the Scorpion shuttle, and they can't leave the other way because they got the door sealed. So he shoots the door to the corridor, and they fly through the corridors.
Right.
In this friggin' shuttle. Now the corridors, they're pretty big. I mean, it looks like they're inside of an auditorium, you know, inside the ship.
Right,
and they fly out
the inside's going to be epic, so.
Yeah, they fly out the friggin' huge window. They crash through the window, and they fly right to the ship, and then the Enterprise grabs them before Shinzon can use a tractor beam. They just beam it back into the shuttle bay, and then the Enterprise takes off, and then we have this chase where, you know, they're going towards trying to get back to home, and they're going to go into a nebula where they think there's going to be starships waiting there or something like that, you know. And
isn't there some scene in the end where the Enterprise is basically crashes itself into the Scimitar?
Yeah, that's when they get to the nebula. What happened is that knowing that being in the nebula was going to cut off their communications ability to contact the other ships, Shinzon waited till the Enterprise got into that nebula before he decloaked and fired on the Enterprise, because that was the time to hit him. That way there was no way the other ships would know that there was a fight going on inside this nebula. So he waited until the Enterprise reached it, and then as soon as they got there, they fired the weapons at the Enterprise. And what was the first thing that goes down? The shield that LaForge had put up around the warp core to keep it from to protect it. That was the first friggin' thing that came down. It's like, well, that shield was useless. Why did you put the shield around the warp core, and the very first hit, the friggin' shield comes down?
Oh my goodness, you must have a really good ability to multitask, which I don't, because you pick up on points in the movie I must have slept through, and I must. Because I said I was trying to figure out Shinzon this, Remans that, Scimitar this, before that, Mind Rape scene this, you know, it was all stuff being thrown at me.
Yeah.
And I was trying to follow this thing, but it wasn't really following through a cohesive narrative. I mean, even though I wasn't that into First Contact, at least it followed a narrative where I knew where things were going to be, what they were trying to do. This was like they weren't focused on anything.
I know. It was everywhere. It was
all, you know, they didn't really establish the B4 plot line as a big thing. They kind of threw stuff in and around that. So it's kind of hard to figure out where there is. So, of course, I'm going to kind of, you know, maybe get to the ending first. They do crash into the Scimitar, and Data ends up being killed in an explosion.
Yeah, well, what happened is the Romulans show up first to try to help the Enterprise out after the Enterprise takes serious damage to the point where the ship really is about ready to just fall apart. And
like before she hit the Quantum Time ship?
So the Romulans show up. They got 3 Romulan ships and the Enterprise, and the Scimitar somehow manages to take out all the Romulan ships.
The Romulan ships are not the ones we saw that did Derridex. There's some other new Romulan ship I've never seen before.
Yeah, it was like a modified D Derridex.
Yeah, the wings are way longer and the fronts seem way smaller. They're these long,
thinner and wide. They're pretty big, you know, but they're thinner. And so what happens is they start to fight, and then it still ends up between the Enterprise E and the Scimitar. And this Enterprise has no more torpedoes left. Their phasers are practically gone. So Picard's last-ditch attempt is he tries to signal to Troy, who ends up back at the helm again in this movie.
Yeah, why do they keep putting Troy at the helm of these ships? The last time she does, the Enterprise got destroyed.
He sends her a signal.
Non-helm material.
Yeah, he sends her a signal to put the ship at full impulse power. Now, keep in mind, he did not notify anybody in the rest of the ship that they were going to do a head-on collision. So everybody that was in the front of the Enterprise was still there, had no idea what Picard was going to do. So nice going there, Picard. You just killed a lot of your people without telling them to evacuate that area because we're going to do something stupid here. So
I feel like I should have watched this movie over again, because I would have had to sit there with like a little monocle looking at every scene to try to figure out where things were going to be, because everything is happening at so many different paces at the same time again. You know?
Yeah. So they push the ship forward, and Shinzon's there like looking at it like, what's he going to do? You know, like, why is the ship coming in? And this idiot says, he looks at him like he's like waiting for Shinzon to say, do something. And he says, reverse. So by then it was too late. So the ship tries to back up, and then Picard slams into the front of the ship, and it takes this long scraping drag into this thing where you see him plow into that big shuttle bay.
Yeah, that where the ship is kind of disintegrating and everything.
Yeah. And then they're kind of just like locked together in space, sitting there, and you hear the sound of rafters creaking, and it's like, where's their rafters? You know, inside these ships, there's no wood in these damn things. I mean, why you hear this?
Well, it's like Star Trek 2. We always talk about that trope where they hit the impulse deck, and all of a sudden these crazy bulkheads come from the top.
Yeah,
and
with all the wires.
The guy flies through a wire. The guy flies right through a wire. He's like, wing! You know, it's just like, what do they have, a spring underneath there where he just wing the wire? You know, like, press a little magic boingy spring, you know, and with this you have a parent. Okay, so we're gonna crash into the Scimitar. Let's get up the wooden rafters so they make no crash into this thing.
So Shinzon manages to pull his ship. Now remember, this is no zero gravity environment, but somehow he manages to pull his ship away from the Enterprise E without dragging it with it, right? You can't, there's no friction to hold the Enterprise E in place to pull it out. So he pulls the ship out, and the Enterprise E is like the kind of distance between them. And now Picard's got nothing left to do but to beam over to the Scimitar and actually stop this weapon that's being formed on the stupid Scimitar. It was taking a month of Sundays to start. You know, it's got all these wingtips opening up and little pieces of metal coming out and everything. So he was going to use that last weapon to just wipe out the Enterprise, okay? And so Picard beams over, then the transporter blows up. So Data wants to go over there and help the captain. The only way he can get over there is to go into an exposed part of the Enterprise and jump clean over to the Scimitar, which was this big, kind of like a Superman kind of scene, you know, where he could actually, you know. So he does that, and he goes over there, and he gets into the Scimitar, and again, we're back into the Star Wars scene where you got, you know, everybody's shooting and everything, and all that. And he saves Picard. He gets him out of there, and Picard is looking for Shinzon, and it comes to this big knife fight between the two of them, and Picard's trying to go. I don't know why they did this, but on the bridge of the Scimitar, the core of this weapon is in the back of the bridge. And it's like, why would they put this thing in the back?
Yeah, you know what? It's weird you mentioning this movie.
Yeah.
I was describing a movie I don't even remember seeing because, like I said, I kind of lose my attention with it, a lot of the stuff, because it's like,
yeah.
You know,
but yeah, I mean, so anyway, they're fighting, and Picard manages to get Shinzon killed because Shinzon flings himself towards the captain, and he pulls down this sharp rod from the wall, and he actually impales himself with it. And so he dies. Shinzon finally dies. I mean, because he was going to die anyway, because whatever happened to him as a clone,
he was going to hyper age.
Yeah, he was hyper aging, and he was going to die anyway. So Picard's standing there, and he's like in a daze, and Data finds him, and he shows up, and he opens up something in his arm, and he pulls out a little transporter device. I don't know how that actually worked, but he pins it on Picard, and Picard beams away, and Data's left behind. They can't use it. It doesn't take two. It can only take one. So Data takes his phaser out, shoots it into the stupid weapon energy thing, whatever the hell that was, and the whole ship blows up. And yet the Enterprise is like 2 feet away from it. And this whole ship blows up, and the Enterprise doesn't get damaged from it.
And when the flying Data came in somewhere in this point, I remember him flying through space at one point.
Yeah, I mentioned that's what he did. He jumped clean over to the Scimitar to get onto the ship to help Picard stop this friggin' weapon thing being formed and stop it from shooting the Enterprise. But that's what happened. At the end, they finally get there, and then Data shoots the thing with his phaser, and the whole thing blows up. And like I said, the Enterprise was sitting right there, and they don't get any damage from it. And so now everybody's like, you know, all sad and everything because Data was on the ship because he didn't make it back because only the captain did. And so now the Romulans and the Enterprise are trying to work together to get themselves operable again so they can get out of the nebula and get to those starships that are waiting for them so they can get some help. So, you know, that's pretty much how we you know, after they do that, we have this big thing at the end where they have this drink, you know, to toasting to lost friends. And
right, and one of the friends is going to be lost is Riker because he and Troy are leaving the ship. And I want to establish this as a canon show to go over to, and I think this is actually established as canon now. It hasn't been seen on TV, but I've heard stories that are considered canon. This ship, the Titan.
Yeah. And
this is the Eagle Moss Collector magazine. I have the model, but it's over there, so I'm not going to show that to you. But apparently it's a Luna-class starship. And as you can see, it's not too bad. It's similar to the Akira class and the Intrepid class, except the saucer's a little rounder. I wish we'd seen a little of a Titan in the end of this movie.
Yeah, they could have showed it.
Riker flying away. That could have been a perfectly doable ship in CGI. It could have
been parked right next to the Enterprise while it was under repair.
It was off screen though. That was just the whole.
Yeah, when they showed the Enterprise and they were showing everybody working on it, trying to fix it, they could have showed the Titan in the background sitting there, you know, waiting for Riker to show up with Troy.
And then, of course, in the end, we have that scene where, you know, we hear before who's being reprogrammed, starting to sing parts of
the wedding song
of Irving Berlin.
Yeah,
guys, you know. So basically, I'm sensing sequel. The Search for Data.
maybe Data is going to reemerge from B4.
Right. Now that's been covered in a comic book, if I believe. But that's, again, not canon. That's what they call it, beta content. So
you call that, but yeah.
Well, not non-canon material, but fan fiction, whatever. But anyway, so Star Trek canon basically ends with the Enterprise E in space dock under repair. And okay. Is there anything in the movie you wanted to cover other than that? In the actual,
they had at the very end. There was a nice scene that they had at the end that they cut, which would have been kind of funny. Where they had Picard comes up onto the bridge and he meets his new first officer, and they had this little talk, and then Captain Picard sits down in the chair and he pushes his button and all these seat belts come out and he says it's about time. Because all you guys watch Star Trek, but they never had any seatbelts. Okay, and people are flying across the bridge every time they take.
Anniversary, Leonard Nimoy made that as a joke. Why did they put seatbelts on the Enterprise, even the Connie? I mean, now Kirk had that little restraint in the motor that came over the motion picture, but nobody else had belts that went over them. It was like, we're gonna fly if the ship gets going. We're gonna fly into the sky. But now that I think about it, Star Trek kind of predated the mass use of seatbelts.
Yeah.
In 1966, 67, they were coming out, but people didn't use them. They were actually doing TV commercials. If you look on YouTube saying, "Buckle your safety belt, you'll get killed if you don't." I mean, it wasn't the law yet.
I was young enough not to wear a seatbelt in a car when we.
It wasn't the law. Now it's the law. You have to, but in those days, there was no law.
That's right.
It was there as a recommendation, but there was no law about it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I this thing Star Trek is kept with the seatbeltless culture.
Yeah.
Or maybe like, well, when something crashes into us, we'll just have some wire or some bulkhead you can fly through. Like
it's almost becoming a chairless culture because you've got crew members that stand all day.
Right, because Spock stood around, basically.
Yeah. Not everybody has a chair on the bridge. They
now, here's the thing about the Enterprise E. Did Riker actually have a chair on that ship?
They did have a chair for Troy and Riker on the bridge, in the usual spot. But Worf was still standing. He didn't have a chair. And there was a lot of other people in other stations that were standing, and they didn't have chairs. And I'm thinking, that's a long time to be on your feet all day, to just stand in front of a computer for 8 hours or whatever, how long the ship.
They should put something around like a restraint, so when the ship buckles, they're not real.
Yeah, they're not the first. Yeah, you don't want your tactical officer of all people flying across the bridge when he should be firing in their faces.
Yeah, it's like, remember we talked about that with Insurrection, where all of a sudden they're doing these crazy Matrix-like gunning scenes.
Yeah.
Like, all this kind of business. So, again, I just remember with Nemesis, they're flying all over the place in this movie.
Oh, yeah. They actually said they
flying everywhere.
They actually said they built the bridge on a gimbal for this movie so they could actually rock the set as they were doing the scenes. So you could actually see the sets shaking. Unlike
before, where they would actually just kind of have characters all move.
Yeah, they'd take the camera and they'd just...
But now they actually move the set.
Yeah, actually, this time they could actually shake it.
I'm hoping that none of those crew had needed Dramamine or anything. It was... it would be interesting. I think Bones in Star Trek 6 say, "I think I'm going to be sick," because the ship was buckling and he's sitting there holding on to something. I'm surprised it didn't fall off and have wires come out of it and have him just fly through it. Those old 23rd century, these wires that came down, they just fly. And
I thought it was funny where LaForge was trying to make the transporter work, and when the captain beamed away, all these sparks come flying at him. And I'm thinking, boy, he was sitting pretty damn close to that friggin' squib when that went off. It's only he didn't get burned,
Well, that's a good point. Jordy must have known exactly where to stand.
Yeah.
I'm going to be like a centimeter away from these sparks, which might burn me. So I'm just going to be like right over here, and nobody will know the difference. I'll be a miracle worker, Yeah,
those things don't always go off the way you want them to,
Jordy didn't seem to even... I would, they're doing all these things now with this Discovery. I would love to see like Star Trek short stories while Geordi's sitting there in his bedroom for hours drinking Coco No-Nos while researching the Enterprise E from top to stern. Remember he's giving that woman those Coco No-Nos?
Yeah, in the holodeck.
Coconut things. He's sitting there with the coconut drinking something out of the replicator. Like, I'm going to make sure I know where to stand if I'm in the transporter and sparks come out. And, here's where the warp core shield's going to be and everything. Where he's just like researching what's going to happen on this ship like the back of his hand, so he knows. Because he was new to the Galaxy class. That was his baby. That was what he knew.
Yeah.
And the Enterprise E was nothing like the Galaxy class. The Galaxy class was like a cruise ship.
It seemed like Geordi really had no control over the engine room at all in any of those movies, the Star Trek Next Generation movies.
Yeah, it always seemed to overtake him in some way.
Yeah, like he wasn't there when they needed him.
In Generations, the Warp Core breach kind of happened, and he said there's nothing I can do about it, so he's powerless.
Yeah.
Then the same thing, something more or less similar happens in First Contact.
Yeah, I mean he's not there. He's not on the engine room, and the engine room gets taken over by the Borg.
And then in Insurrection, he's fresh out of warp cores.
Yeah, he's ejecting warp cores. So it's like everything was always out of his hands all the time, and it doesn't seem to have much control over the engine room at all.
I really think the Enterprise D was more his baby. He seemed to have more control over that one, except in the end.
Yeah.
Apparently, when they went over to theatrical films, Geordi didn't have much power over engineering and just kind of controlled him.
Yeah.
He was just there to keep things from blowing up.
Yeah.
Basically at the end of the day. So that would have been an interesting scene to see Picard with the seatbelts on.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Where do I start with this movie? It's not my least favorite, but I just find the plot really sketchy, like I said many times in this review. But let me get into an interesting thing I didn't know about this. This movie was directed by Stuart Baird and written by John Logan. And apparently, among the fans and even the staff members, neither of them were well respected for what they did.
Yeah.
Marina Sirtis, for her part, didn't have particularly good things to say about Stuart Baird. His direction was described as overly complicated. Reviews reflected that. Logan's screenplay had apparently failed no better. So apparently there was a writing and directing problem with this film.
Yeah.
And boy, did it show.
And it showed, yeah.
Because you had all these plot points, and all of them had little subplots too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, imagine somebody's trying to grow this tree, and they're trying to get it to train straight up, and you know how difficult it is botanically to get a tree to grow the way you want it to.
Yeah.
But this tree grew all hard and all. This was a tree that was choking itself.
Yeah.
Under its own weight. So by the end, it was like, okay, so Data has died. You get that, and they're all talking about absent friends. Riker is leaving for the Titan. There was a bunch of stuff that just happened with Romulans and Remans.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that sounds weird, but that's how there's a bunch of stuff that happened.
Yeah, they were going to send Riker back to the border to do these talks with the Romulans, and maybe that would have been the start of a peace treaty, maybe, with the Titan, and that would be his first mission.
And like I said, as we discussed before, supposedly the next thing that happened in here was the destruction of Romulus. But to be honest with you, there is no certainty right now if that happened in the same timeline.
Yeah. Anyway, that would happen years after Nemesis anyway.
Right. So we don't know what. I mean, Nemesis, I count as basically the end of canon for now, which is too bad because there really should be a follow-up to that, like an official ending.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Picard retires, bye-bye Enterprise.
It didn't feel like an ending, like a last movie of the next
generation. I mean, they set up that sequel with Data.
Yeah, I mean, there was so many threads left there that they could have picked up for another movie that it just did not feel like, like Star Trek 6.
Right, where they were opening that up for possibly, another movie. With Star Trek 6, it was like, that's it. The old crew's going to be gone.
Yeah, everybody signed off at the end. You got the idea that it was going to be their
right, and even in the beginning, they're talking about moving on from the Enterprise.
Yeah.
In this movie, they were just on a mission. There was no talk about... Riker was moving on, but there was no talk about Picard moving on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Picard still have the ship.
I mean, Crusher was going to leave. She was going back to Starfleet Medical or something like that. She was going to leave the Enterprise, but...
And what would have been cool, I would have loved to have seen it with them to be 2 Titan films.
They could have picked up from that, yeah.
Yeah, because in Titan would have been a whole new thing. Aliens that weren't humanoid. It would have been to see Riker as the lead guy. See Troy, and Riker could have actually developed his own trope on that.
Yeah.
Troy, whatever you do not take the helm of this ship. Do not touch the helm. Don't go near it. Do not make eye contact with it. Yeah. Leave it alone because this Luna-class ship does not need to be crashed or burnt or blown up.
Yeah. I mean, they could have done a movie.
Every time you go near the helm, boom.
Yeah. I mean, they could have done a movie where they had both the Enterprise E and the Titan doing a mission together.
Right, kind of a joint mission in space. Yeah.
That would have been a great another movie, a sequel.
Well, like I said, we can dream. and hope and wonder, because I would love to see those things happen. And you never know. You really never know. Nowadays, especially, you never know.
It would have been a good movie idea to have Deep Space Nine, that something around Deep Space Nine happens.
Yeah, we were talking about that because Deep Space Nine was so cinematic in its scope anyway.
Yeah, really.
I mean, it would be nice to take that into a movie context. I mean, even the Dominion War should have been movie worthy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, rather than just kind of the easy way they set it up, they should have made it a big epic. Yeah. Instead of having the fire cave like a little set, the fire cave should have been this big cavernous thing.
Yeah.
And there should have been this really deep thing that happened there. But, Deep Space Nine almost was too small for the small screen.
Too big
for the small screen. And you really needed a bigger venue. But no, the thing with Nemesis that got me, and I knew this was going to happen, there was talk with this movie that Data was not going to be around anymore because Brent Spiner was not old, but his features were starting to defy the makeup. And he was afraid if they'd gone on any more, Data would start to show signs of aging, which he couldn't.
Yeah.
Except, I believe when he encountered that hologram of Dr. Sung, he had programmed that android of his mother to age.
That's right.
Couldn't they have found a way to make that technology work for Data where he'd appear to age?
Yeah, they could have.
Bring him close to humanity so Brent Spiner could age, and it would make sense.
They made the trouble of giving him a motion chip in one of the other movies. They could have done that, the aging thing for him in another movie. So,
And then have him terminate after a long life, which would have made Data mortal, which would have brought him close to being human.
Yeah.
So, it wouldn't make him human, but it would make him close to it.
Yeah.
So, and that could have been kind of a Dickensian and interesting kind of, more Shakespearean kind of ending. But, no, they killed off Data, which was not the easiest thing for me because, as a person, we all have our Star Trek characters we love, but I actually identified in a lot of ways with Data's experience. A person who wasn't quite like other people in a lot of ways, but, trying to find out who they were, kind of a Pinocchio character who, was thought of as, one thing but was actually another. In his case, unreal and not a lie, but he actually was. And I think, understanding it now, a lot of people who had autism and things like that really related to Data. So, seeing him killed off was kind of like losing a brother, even though he was a character. It was a little weird. It really felt like an ending with that.
I felt like it was an exploitive ending. Like, they wanted to have some kind of a tearjerker moment in this movie because it was going to be their last movie. And I felt like they were just kind of exploiting that, in a way.
Yeah, I
wasn't really necessary to have to kill him off at the end.
It really wasn't. And the thing is, I wasn't so much having a tearjerker moment, but I was just more depressed. It was like, did they really need to do that? They could have made this character interesting and kept it going.
Yeah, it was unfortunate they went that route because even though they had the B4 other character to back up, maybe Data would emerge in that. It seemed like it was, a bit contrived that at the end of this big battle, it would take one person to sacrifice himself and destroy the whole ship and everything.
Yeah, a very bourgeois Hollywood cliche.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, come on.
Yeah, so, like I said, again, and I don't think Gene Roddenberry would have liked that much, going the Manifest Destiny route.
Yeah.
One person controlling their destiny.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is Star Trek. This isn't an Ayn Rand novel. Data wasn't the supermensch.
Yeah.
He wasn't that, he was a character who was vulnerable and complicated and the noble sacrifice thing has been done so many times.
Yeah.
Spock did that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Spock was enough, and that wasn't gimmicky. He just wanted to leave the show. I know Brent kind of thought it was his time to go too.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the end of the movie opened up for a sequel, but it kind of felt a little funereal. Yeah. And I don't know. I wish we had seen something else out of canon other than that kind of dreary ending.
Yeah. In reality, I wish they'd have just redid the whole friggin' story, come up with a whole other idea, because at the end of the day, that story was really, like you said, it was all over the place, and it was hard to follow, and it had too many weird things going on in it that they didn't follow up on. So I would have said, trash this movie, write a new one.
You take out that really creepy and unpleasant Troy mind rape scene.
Yeah.
And if you were going to have that, don't have that ridiculous Picard dialogue of, we're going to make you do it 4 times.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, boy, you just sort of ruined 7 years of Picard history there.
Yeah.
you kind of made him into this enabler now.
Yeah.
But like I said, that's probably the bad writing and the bad directing. But, and here's the weird thing. It's not my least favorite Star Trek movie, but it's not one I ever go back to much,
Yeah. I've only seen it maybe a handful of times.
It's an absolute mess. It doesn't really find a place and go with it.
Yeah. The only one that I watch more of is Generations, to be honest with you. I keep going back to that.
Right, but there's a story to follow there. There's some cerebral nature to it, but there's a story you can follow. With Nemesis, I hate to say that it's sort of, in a way, even though it's still canon, it's the beginning of Star Trek kind of being all show and no go. You know what I mean?
Wasn't there this long hiatus after this movie where Star Trek kind of went in limbo for a while, and then it came back and those.
Well, what happened is about 3 years after Nemesis, we lost Enterprise.
Yeah.
And then for about 5 years, we had that dry spell.
Yeah.
Until the Kelvin thing.
Yeah.
But like I said, that made Insurrection. Not Insurrection. I'm just trying to think of a movie I liked a little bit better. That made Nemesis the last forward-thinking canon movie. We had Enterprise, that was a prequel.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. They also did that weird thing at the end in Enterprise with the...
Oh, yeah, where the Riker and...
Yeah, but I don't know what that is. That was like, just get Enterprise out there quickly, send it away.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just... So, I guess with the state of Star Trek now, as we talked about, now it's in legal entanglements and crazy stuff.
I ain't even going to go there to even explain what the hell is going on.
I can. I really can. This is... I watch these videos, and sometimes I think, what?
Yeah.
You must about 12 seconds ago.
You got to be a lawyer to understand what the hell they did over there.
I mean, look, I can understand Latin ipso facto, nuke choke tongue, rather than this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, this is said in plain English, but it's so convoluted. It's like reading a stereo instruction from the 1980s.
Yeah. You need a how-to book just to put it all back together. I mean, what they've done over there is they basically destroyed any chance of Star Trek coming back the way it was, because they got all these people coming and going, heads of companies coming and going. So everybody that's going to eventually come back, they're not going to have...
And, it's made our position a little harder because I've noticed in a lot of our videos, we often end it with a discussion of how messed up Star Trek is now. And it's hard to avoid.
It is, because, that's where we are now. I mean, that's...
And like I said, now we're sitting here, actually, both of us, saying, okay, so is Trek Prime an appropriate name? Is the rumor mill true? I mean,
at this point, this is why you and I started this thing, was because where we are now with the Star Trek world, it's trying to redefine itself, what Star Trek is. But we're trying to say is we already know what it is. This is what Star Trek is. This is what you need to come back to.
And they're not redefining it in a way that's productive like The Next Generation did.
Yeah.
They're not doing Discovery or anything in the future. They're not doing the J.J. Abrams movies and something. What they're doing is they're trying to go back and say, Star Trek always was this and always was that.
Yeah. It's history.
And like I said, that actually gets a lot of people into trouble over the years, and it's getting Star Trek in trouble. And to be honest with you, what a shame for canon Star Trek to go out with Nemesis, a movie that was certainly not its strongest, not its most coherent, and not its most popular.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if it at least had gone out with some proper ending.
Yeah. I mean, if they intended it to be the last movie, that it should have been written in that way, like Star Trek 6 was.
Right. 6 was like, you could see at the beginning of the movie, they were all moving on.
Yeah.
All of them were.
Yeah. But at the end, it didn't feel like a last movie. It felt like, oh, there's going to be a sequel, So, it was bizarre how they ended it that way.
So I guess from here on, we've done all the movies. And one idea that Jeff and I have for the future for his segments, I don't know if you're still planning on doing them, is to analyze relevant episodes of different parts of the series.
Yeah, just to kind of go look at them and see what they were, what the meaning behind the episodes were and things like that.
Right, because, like I said, there's a lot of good episodes in the start. There's a lot of...
I think we like to analyze characters, too. Other characters.
Right, we can do characters. But like I said, I knew when the Next Generation movies were going to end, it was going to end in a bleak, depressing way. Where, you know, Star Trek 6 had its flaws, but it really wasn't that depressing in the end. It was actually had kind of a hopeful message.
Yeah, it did.
So at least they sent. I mean, even if Kirk hadn't appeared in Generations, that would have been a good bye-bye to Kirk.
Yeah. That's why to this day I feel like Generations was the last real Star Trek Next Generation episode. You know, I think of that as, and not All Good Things as the last episode. I think
That was the last time we had the Enterprise D and everything.
Yeah, that seemed more like an ending to the series rather than the previous thing that they made. All Good Things.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if Generations had been like a TV movie or something, and then the first movie had been First Contact, so it would have seemed a little more official.
Yeah, it actually would have probably worked as a TV movie because they really didn't go out of their way to try to make that movie look like it would belong on the big screen, to be honest with you. Because
they just basically kept most of the sets, just enhanced a little bit of them. And they actually used TV footage of the Enterprise. We're talking about Generations now, but back to Nemesis, you know, I mean, it would have been nice to put the Enterprise E in maybe an exploration context. They kind of tried to with Insurrection, but they kept... Yeah, and that's the thing about movies. I noticed that when they do sci-fi movies, they always try to get people to go into battle.
Yeah.
You know, rather than have them explore another realm.
Yeah.
It would be nice. That's what they did in the motion picture. They had them explore another realm. I would love to see the Enterprise E exploring some other exotic place in a movie and using movie effects to bring you into that other world.
Yeah.
Rather than just let's just throw action guns at people. You know, just boldly go, you know?
Yeah.
Boldly go where no one's gone before. Instead of boldly go out there with guns and shoot aliens, you know? I mean,
yeah.
That's just my opinion. But I don't have really much to say about this movie. As you can see, I barely remember parts of it.
It's been a long time. I mean,
thank you. Well, I saw it last year with my boyfriend, but I'm glad you could fill it in because obviously a lot more stuck in your mind that you could remember than I could.
Oh, it's because I've seen everything as laughable. And I always remember things that make me laugh. So I just, that's why I remember all these things, how that happened. Because, I talk to other friends about it, and we always pick out the weird parts of a movie or something like that, and we laugh over it. And there was a lot of weirdness in this movie to laugh about. I mean, it was, the Jeep and the stupid, the gun fights and the campy looking scorpion ship flying through the corridors, and all these weird. I don't know. I don't even know what the hell the writers were thinking. They must have been drunk, for some of this stuff. But yeah, it was weird. But like it is what it is. We can't go back and redo it. So,
so now we're done with these, 4 very messy, inconsistent Star Trek: The Next Generation movies, which didn't really hit the mark consistently the way their counterparts in TOS era did.
Yeah.
And I always felt bad about that. I always just the Next Generation movies had been what the series was.
Yeah.
But what they did, they decided to try to change direction in the movies and make it more action-oriented. And those characters and those people just didn't work in that context.
Yeah, those characters don't work as action characters. They never did.
I mean, they should have done those characters in movies in the context of more diplomatic thrillers or things like that, something with a little more of a human quality. Insurrection was a good attempt at that, but instead, they tried to throw them into battle in the end again.
Yeah, at the end, yeah.
But, I guess it depends on what you think Star Trek is, so...
They figure that if they don't have any shoot-'em-ups at the end of a film, nobody's going to watch it,
And I mean, even though that's not my present thing and not per se yours, I have to remember, Star Trek was not made for Andre Grindle and was not made for Jeff Melanson.
Yeah.
It's not being made for us as audiences, and apparently, in this case, it's not so much the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. It's more like the needs of the many outweigh the lack of money. That's how I think they're kind of looking at it.
Yeah.
Like, they're looking at a cash grab, but
yeah.
There
wasn't a whole lot of merchandise that came out for this.
No, there's that little model, like I said.
It didn't really make anything out of it, so I guess they didn't make a whole lot of money.
I don't think it was that popular.
Yeah.
I remember going to Blockbuster and Movie Gallery, remember them?
Yeah.
And I'd go into the used movie section, and among all the copies of Little Nicky, and what was that movie that Ben Affleck and J-Lo did, Geely, remember that disaster?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Geely. Among 1,000, there was like 5 or 6 stacks of widescreen Star Trek-Nemesis copies.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the first budget bin Star Trek movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Insurrection was hard to get on DVD pre-owned, but they had tons of Nemesis. And when Blockbuster or Movie Gallery had tons of backloaded movies, it meant nobody wanted them.
That's right.
And like Star Trek with Geely? Ugh, that's not good.
Who would have thought, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying movies that came out around that time. You know, so yeah. So to me, I'm surprised Star Trek of any form ever made it to the theatrical big screen after that.
Yeah.
Because there just wasn't really much of a market for the brand after that, I don't think.
Yeah, and I don't know why they felt that going back and redoing TOS was the way to go to
Right.
relaunch.
And to do that, I mean, I'm not going to cross my eyes trying to explain that anymore. It's
Yeah.
Or I have you cross yours. It's ridiculous and it's absurd. But, you know, I mean, there's all this crap about make America great again, make Star Trek great again.
Yeah, really.
You know, I mean, you know, but then, you know, of course, if we did, that would put us in the domain of conservative Star Trek fans. Except the problem is that, hey, Star Trek is not great now.
Yeah.
It's not strong. It's not creative.
Yeah.
So it actually applies. It's not a dog whistle for anything.
We need to get more fans involved with these shows.
Yes,
you know,
yes,
that's not
good.
let these guys with money get involved with these movies.
That's been your trope all along, right along with my detector circuit thing.
All the YouTube fan films that have been made, they are absolutely perfect. I mean, I love them. I love them, every one of them, no matter how low budget they might look. They always reflect
canon.
It's canon. They always reflect canon.
And number 8 or 9 at this point.
Yeah, they don't try to do something ridiculous. And so it's like, why don't you just go to these people and say, will you help us make a friggin' Star Trek movie that people will go see? Instead, they'll just be arrogant about it and ignore us, and they'll just do what they want, and they fail every single time. They fail, you know?
Yeah. And so anyway, I guess that concludes our conversation about Star Trek Enterprise, Discovery.
Yeah.
Nemesis. And you know, this next time we'll continue our conversations on Trek Prime, which name we're keeping for now. And I think it still sounds like a fine name for our podcast. And we're going to keep emphasizing our canonization. Now, forget that. I'll have a stamp made.
Yeah.
You know, a rubber stamp myself. This is canon.
Canon, yeah.
You know, at this point, I'm gonna have a stamp made on this because, you know, I just keep saying it all the time. I'll get a stamp or a decal. You know,
maybe you could just put it up on the wall here or something.
Yeah, put it on my hat. Canon. Oh, my Star Trek canon hat. Make Star Trek canon again. There you go. Make Star Trek canon again. We'll just do that. So, a lot of, as Q would say, we're a veritable fountain of good ideas tonight, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know. So anyway, so that was Nemesis, such as it was, and next week and the week after that, I got some ideas floating around. The sky's the limit. So anyway,
next week, what I'd like, or maybe not next week, but the week after or sometime, we ought to go over like ideas on how we could have ended some of these Star Trek series, you know.
Well, yeah, we talked about that, kind of like alternate endings.
Yeah, ways that the show could have ended in a lot better way.
There we go. I mean, that's sort of headcanon, I think they call that.
Because you're drawing on canon in order to create, you know, something different.
So we'll just regurgitate and make it turducken canon if we have to. I mean, that's the way it has to be. You can kind of alternate it and keep it within the canon. So anyway, that's it for Trek Prime episode 37.